trickle in. Um, we are going to record today's session. There were a couple of people who couldn't be here, and we want to send it out to a resource as a resource to our community. We also chose to do this in meeting and not webinar mode to just allow for some more engagement and interaction. So thank you so much for being sensitive and just making sure you're on mute unless you're asking a question or speaking. But without further ado, my name is Mary Sipers, and I have the honor of serving as the Regional Director for ADL in the Pacific Northwest. We're really excited to be hosting you today for our second annual legislative briefing to tee up a very robust legislative agenda in which we will be advocating for some really important policies in the upcoming session in Olympia starting in January, although our work has been going on for a long time. So just to kind of give you a little preview of what you can expect today, we are going to show a short video right now that's going to preview one of the biggest priority bills that we're going to be pushing for in Olympia in the next session. My colleague Stephen Paolini, our Associate Regional Director, is going to be highlighting our legislative overview. And then we're really honored to be joined by guest speakers, including Cassie Chin, the Deputy Director of the Wing Luke Museum, Senator Drew Hansen, Senator Javier Valdez, and Representative Sen, who are all allies or champions of various pieces of critical legislation to ADL. And then finally, around 12:30, we will open up for plenty of Q&A. We'd love to answer your questions, dive deeper if you have any thoughts or queries. And of course, also if there are other leaders on the call, and there seem to be some issues of alignment, we'd love to hear what you're up to and what you'll be championing in the coming session. So Kendall, thank you so much for queuing up the video that's going to explain the importance of passing a statewide bias helpline in Washington State.
My son, Matt, was murdered in October of 1998 in what became known as a hate crime.
Matthew Shepard was beaten last weekend, tied to a wooden fence by two men who met Shepard in a bar in Laramie, Wyoming.
I left my family and my home to pursue my American dream. 10 days after 9/11 terrorist attacks, I began what would be my last day of work as a store clerk in southeast Dallas. A man walked in wearing a bandana and holding a sort of double-barrel shotgun, pointing straight at my face, and then he mumbled a question. "Where are you from?" I felt cold air flow through my spine, and before I could say anything more than, "Excuse me," he pulled the trigger from point-blank range, left me to die on a cold concrete convenience store floor.
We live in a multicultural society, and people are different. Some people don't like that and will target a person because it's Tuesday, because they've believe that the person is less. And when that happens, it's not just that person who's at risk, who's been hurt. It's everyone who looks like them, who loves like them. There's a whole community that's impacted. When you're ready, in your own words, would you mind telling me exactly what happened?
Oregon's Bias Incident Hotline is an incredible, innovative project that Oregon's Department of Justice and Attorney General has put together to speak directly to victims and communities impacted by hate, to say, we see you, we're here for you, and we will work with you, and we will act to do something for you. We've had the good fortune of working with the hotline on dozens of cases impacting Oregonians, and we really want people in Washington State and throughout the United States to have these kinds of supports and services when they experience prejudice.
Because we need to understand that nobody wants to be a victim of hate. It's a shame that people hate others because of who they are. And a victim of hate crime should not go through what I went through. If we could simplify and streamline reporting process to make it easier for victims of hate crimes and witnesses to come forward. So a 24/7 support line is extremely crucial, and it will benefit not only the victims of hate crimes, but also society as a whole. Sometimes people need a little inspiration, a kind word, a gentle touch, a trusted shoulder to lean on, and a strength to discover their resilience and inner spirit. And seeing the impact of this work keeps me going.
Great. Thank you so much. And we hope you all enjoyed and learned from that video. And hopefully it's a great tool that we can use to inspire other people to get this helpline past the finish line in the upcoming session. I'm going to pass the mic to Stephen Paolini, ADL's Associate Regional Director, who's going to talk a little bit about the current moment we find ourselves in related to hate and talk about the specifics of our agenda before we hear from our allies and champions. So Stephen, please take it away.
Thank you so much, Mary. Again, everyone, I'm Stephen, the Associate Regional Director here in the Pacific Northwest, and our office covers Washington, Oregon, Idaho, Montana, and Alaska. I'm just going to share kind of two quick stats before I jump into the legislative pieces that we're working on, because I think we all know intuitively that this moment is one that has been filled really with grief and uncertainty for really all communities across different ethnicities and backgrounds. And in particular, too, I think the Jewish and Muslim community. But the first stat is really in the past 2 years, according to the FBI's hate crime report, which they do annually, we've seen among the highest numbers of hate crimes right here in the state of Washington in at least 20 years. 2021 was their last complete data set. We reported 651 hate crimes, a larger total, not per capita, larger total than the entire state of Texas, which has significantly higher population than we do. And in this past year, in 2022, that number has declined just a little bit, but still historically within what would be the top 20, the highest number of hate crimes in at least 20 years. So it's been really just a staggering moment. At ADL, the second piece I wanted to just mention was, we do reporting specific to anti-Semitic incidents. We've reported really in the last 5 years, 3 of the last 5 years have been the highest total in the history of our organization for anti-Semitic incidents of vandalism, harassment, and assault. We're on pace now to see, again, yet another, unfortunately, record-setting year. I know everyone in our office has just been inundated with reports, particularly since October 7th. In an entire year, we'll get about 500 or so requests for assistance. Not all of those are crimes, not all of those are credible, but about 500 requests for assistance in a year in just the last, 40 days, almost 2 months since October 7th. We're already well over 300 in just that small period of time. So it's been an extremely difficult time for everyone in this community. And I just think that creates the urgency really for what we're talking about today. So let's go to the first slide. And I'll be brief because I think you guys want to hear too from some of the awesome people here. So we really have two big priorities this year. The first is something that actually passed for the first time in the state of Washington last year, which is something called nonprofit security grants. It's actually based on a federal program which provides millions of dollars of support to both religious institutions and nonprofit organizations serving all communities that need support with physical security. Just in the past year, we've seen dozens of religious institutions, nonprofit organizations in the Jewish community, the Muslim community, the LGBTQ community, the Black community that have been vandalized or targeted in significant hate-based incidents. Of course, I'll share the stage here shortly with Cassie from the Wing Link Museum, which is another incredibly unfortunate example of institutions that have been targeted. But what I want to underscore for y'all is we, for the first time last year, made a significant step towards providing support to nonprofit institutions that have been targeted by hate. When we first put together, alongside the Department of Commerce, an opportunity to just hear from organizations that might be applying to these grants. We saw literally hundreds of organizations show up asking for more information. And that has really led us to this year, in partnership with the governor's office. It is in the governor's supplemental budget request to raise that number from about $500,000 a biennium to $1 million a biennium. So I'll toss into a second to our House and Senate champions on this budget proviso, but I want to underscore just these 3 quick points. First, we actually know from the federal program that there is $7 million of unmet need from the federal program for assistance to the nonprofit security grant. Those are unmet but qualified grants. And this process locally provides a sort of easier, more streamlined way for particularly smaller institutions to access funds that may not otherwise have been able to do so. So just an amazingly important policy. Obviously, I'll take questions later, but this is our first priority. Let's go to the second one. And the second piece is what you heard from our video a few minutes ago. This is a bill we ran last year, made through Senate Law and Justice Committee, and we're coming back this year to establish a hate crime and bias incident response team within the Attorney General's office. This is modeled after a similar program in the state of Oregon, which received over 2,890 incidents of bias and hate in 2022. They served nearly 3,000 victims in those incidents by providing referrals, emergency financial assistance, advocacy, coordination with law enforcement, and really serving as what we kind of call system navigators, meaning helping folks advocate and find all the systems of support, whether they're in nonprofit organizations or government resources or law enforcement, to access that support. It's been a transformational program in Oregon. California recently passed their own version to kind of deliver a similar set of resources to their constituents and residents. And for us, the goal is really three major pieces. 1, level up our support for victims of hate and bias. 2, bring additional reporting and tracking to the issue of hate and bias incidents. 3, level up our coordination with law enforcement on hate incidents. And then finally, inform state policy. Good data and good stories help to inform the kinds of policies that we should work on. Just this past year in Oregon, they actually passed a slew of fixes to address incidents of hate and bias that actually came out of stories, people that reported to the hotline. So it's a great tool for legislators to get kind of a sense of what the issues are and what the gaps are. On the screen, I just wanted to share, this is some preliminary data that their team in Oregon shared with me ahead of this call about incidents since October 7th in the state of Oregon. And I was just blown away by the fact that they were able to provide such real-time data and data in comparison to this time last year. So they're showing, again, higher totals in just since October 7th, affecting the Muslim community, affecting the Jewish community, than they actually had affecting those entire communities in the totality of the previous year. So more incidents just in the last 2 months than they had in the entire year before, affecting the Jewish and Muslim community. And being able to have that data in real time from a state agency helps to give us a sense of how we need to approach these issues and what the scale is and what we're seeing. Not just from an organization like ADL, but from a state agency that can kind of help turn our systems of government towards it. Okay, let's go to the final slide, and I'll just share a quick story that I think helps to articulate the goal here with this hotline. So in middle of January of this year, we had a report into ADL of a business owner, a Latino, who was the victim of a hate crime. He was assaulted, beaten, suffered really significant medical injuries that forced him to close his income, his business. And he had really a lot of trouble because of his injuries staring at a screen for long enough to help navigate and get access to things like victim compensation, small business assistance, or other forms of assistance that exist in our government, that would be accessible to someone like him if he had the chance to apply for it. And so in the process of calling, ADL, we helped him access those resources. I helped fill out applications for him. And unfortunately, fortunately, it helped quite a bit in his circumstance, but unfortunately, he also wasn't able to get financial assistance outside of medical compensation. So this really illustrates a couple of points. First, it illustrates that when you've been victimized by a hate or bias incident, it's incredibly important to have somebody that you can call for support. ADL is like, we're so proud of the fact that we can do that in the cases of folks that call to us. But as I just illustrated, right, we're getting hundreds and hundreds of calls. And there's only so many that we can do without needing more help, and particularly from our government. And then the final piece is, outside of medical compensation, there's a real gap for particularly small business owners or other individuals that suffer significant financial impacts from crimes, but aren't able to get access to support because of that. And so that's something the hotline addresses through a compensation program, which I'm happy to talk about a little bit more. And then as I'm talking, I realize I actually have one slide about kind of what changed from last year. So I'll do that, and then we'll go to the speakers. So a couple of huge, significant changes this year. Number one, I think all the legislators on the call will be really excited to hear that we significantly reduced the cost of this program. So in the previous year, we were at $4 million a biennium. We've now cut that down to $500,000 in the first fiscal year and $2 million in the second fiscal year. So this was the result of a lot of work, which I would be happy to go into if it weren't so boring. But bottom line is we worked really closely with the Attorney General's office and other partners to help really reduce the cost of this program to get it to a place where it's really fiscally responsible for taxpayers. We worked further to clarify the relationship with law enforcement, to ensure that victims are supported and that our systems are working together. We sort of clarified the compensation program to avoid confusion and to streamline the data reporting and collection. And of course, in this moment, there's such an increase in urgency and the need for this program as well. So we're coming back at this with full force and really excited about what the hotline can deliver for folks. I feel like I've talked enough. So I want to, first, I'm going to toss it, if you're okay, to you, Cassie, just to share a little bit about your experience and how that sort of plays into the legislative agenda, and then I'll kind of tick through the other speakers as well. So thank you so much.
And just before Cassie goes, I just want to take a point of privilege to also thank the Jewish Federation of Greater Seattle for being such an incredible partner on the nonprofit security grants. Every step of the way, we've been able to work together to get the initial funding passed and to set our sights, on more resources for our community. So I just wanted to thank them so much for their advocacy on this. And we will pass it to Cassie Chin from the Wing Loop.
One sec, sorry, one quick privilege, apologies. I blanked on one piece. I wanted to clarify a couple things. Just a quick few shout outs to our speakers, and this can kind of serve as the introduction as well. So I wanted to just kind of share how they relate to each of the bills. First, a huge shout out to Senator Hansen, who was the original requester of the nonprofit security grants in our first session last year. Then Representative, now Senator, we're so excited for you and all of that, and so excited that you'll be helping us champion this ask in the Senate as well. You were also, of course, the sponsor of the hotline bill last year as well, and so you've really been a key champion for us as well. Senator Valdez is our prime sponsor in the Senate for the hotline bill last year and this year as well, and then Representative Sen is our really champion for the nonprofit security grants in the House this year. So I just wanted to set that groundwork. Apologies for not doing that before, but just to clarify kind of their roles and their speaking. Okay, Cassie, we've talked enough.
All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Cassie Chin. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm with the Wing Luke Museum of the Asian Pacific American Experience here in Seattle's Chinatown International District. As Stephen mentioned, unfortunately, our museum was subject to a hate crime attack on September 14th this past year. An individual took a sledgehammer to our historic Canton Alley storefront facade on the exterior of our building while exclaiming, anti-Chinese sentiments. I'll be able to just briefly share and speak to my experience within the Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander communities. I've been fortunate to work here in the Chinatown International District for upwards of 30 years. I'm actually a fourth generation Chinese American from Seattle, and Canton Alley was where my grandfather was born. So I count the Chinatown International District as my ancestral roots, my ancestral home. In thinking about the hate crime in September and the time that I've spent growing up here in Seattle and working in the Chinatown International District, I was reflecting that there's one thing that has noticeably changed and one thing that has stayed the same. I think they both show the heightened need and the depth of need. So first, for the change, over these many decades here, I've really noticed a shift in experience within my own experience from individual or family-based, kind of personal-based attacks to now including more public community spaces. So I can recall over a lifetime of individual slurs in passing, maybe more than where do you come from, but go back to where you belong. Those types of things. They might happen just walking down the street, or being on the playground, that type of thing. But they tended not to be in community gathering spaces, and especially not here in the Chinatown International District, this being our place of belonging and home. But the September attack really brought to light more of the threat to public gathering spaces, to our community spaces. We had seen some instances in other places of worship within the Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander communities. And again, we're seeing this amplified all the more. So that's the big change that I've seen. One thing, though, that is not new is this depth of the impact of these acts of hate that span generations. So when September 14th hate crime happened, it wasn't just that singular event, right? I was experiencing the feelings of personal threat over a lifetime. And then also layering in the experience of my family members before, going back generation after generation, say all the way back to 1886 with the anti-Chinese riots and expulsion here in Seattle. And we know across the state, there have been other instances of threats against, say, in my case, the Chinese American communities. Even when the events happened here in September, we heard from other community members, and I quote, that we're tired of being the scapegoat, right? They were feeling all of these generations of what had been happening time and time again in the past. That's layered on within Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander, immigrant, and refugee communities, this low rate of civic engagement, this kind of historic disenfranchisement, an extreme hesitancy to call 911. This stems back from the lack of a pathway to citizenship, kind of always being positioned as outside of community, maybe immigrating or fleeing from countries with oppressive regimes, right? So this culture of kind of silence, of not reporting, of not speaking up, of just holding it in, carries over from generation to generation. It's amplified because of language barriers within our communities, the huge trauma that people carry. So as we think about the legislative briefing, as we're thinking about more support to help enhance security within our community gathering places, as well as support to be able to tell our stories, right? Those things definitely align with needs that we've experienced. So to close, I did want to share and really an appreciation for everybody here, because we know these acts of hate that might happen in one community impact us all. We're all heavy-hearted because of all of the stories that we heard. I'm definitely grateful for all of the people who came alongside and continue to come alongside in especially our case, our museum and the Chinatown International District. We continue to have this call for people to come home. We hope that people will continue to come to the Chinatown International District, view this as a place of belonging and welcome, and appreciate all of the efforts to be able to support our community and communities like ours statewide. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cassie, for really contextualizing the importance of all of this. I am going to keep us moving and go next to Senator Hansen to talk actually about both legislative priorities because he sponsored both. So handing over to you.
Great, thanks, Stephen. I'm sorry, y'all. I should have blurred my Zoom background. You can see how messy my bookshelves are. It's great to see everyone, and thanks so much for having me. Just real quickly on both of those, the hate crimes hotline bill, I had the bill in the House, Senator Valdez had in the Senate, and Senator Valdez is really going to be the lead on that as he was last year. I think the lower price tag is going to help a lot. And then the security grants were something that I sort of reached out to ADL and eventually the Jewish Federation about, because a friend of mine in California noted that they had a similar program, and through some great resources from the Jewish Federation, we found out that, unbeknownst to me, there was this federal program. And look, I mean, the impetus for this was, a couple things, one of which was I went to the bar and bat mitzvahs of the kids of a good friend of mine from law school in LA. And when we rolled up to the temple, we had to go through a private security booth where we were checked off and our IDs were checked. And there was a concrete barrier and there was a metal detector before we went into the temple. And, I just was reflecting back, like when my kids got confirmed in the Bethany Lutheran Church on Bainbridge Island, there was no security guard, there was no concrete barrier, there was no metal detector. And it's just, I know people on this call know this, but it's just a reminder of the security threats are different, right, for different communities. And it's all well and good if you're my friend's temple and you can afford private security, but a lot of nonprofits can't. And a lot of businesses can't. And so we the example we just heard from the Wayne Luke Museum is exactly why this program exists, right? I mean, we want to create resources, whether those are, funds for cameras, funds for metal detectors, funds for whatever you want, so that nonprofits who maybe don't have the ability to fund this themselves can get some help to protect their mission and the people that they serve. And particularly in houses of worship, I mean, how appalling is this, right? That we, for many years have lived in a world where houses of worship are under threat. Again, not my Lutheran church on Bainbridge Island, but a lot of others. And so that was the reason for that. And just super, super excited to see both that we got it in the budget last year and that thanks to the great advocacy of people on this call, we're likely to get it increased if people follow the governor's budget. So, look, it's a sorrowful, solemn time, right? I mean, it's not a fun time to have to put forward legislation like a hate crimes hotline and, budget requests like a security grant. I mean, I wish we didn't have to do any of this, right? But in this scary, bizarre climate when people, particularly people in the Jewish community, but it's also obviously broader than that, are in fact literally under threat and literally under attack. It is important that we as a state step up and try to provide some resources to keep people safe. So, just really grateful for everyone's partnership on this call. We had, we had a great win getting that program in the budget in the first place. Look forward to a great win with Senator Valdez's hate crime bill. Another great win as we expand this with Senator, expand nonprofit security grants next year and elsewhere. But, thank you again for caring so deeply about all of this. And I'm deeply, deeply honored to get to, stand with y'all and fight for all this stuff.
Thank you so much. I'll pass it now to Senator Valdez to just talk a little bit more about the hotline in particular and just all the work that we've been doing in the last interim here to get this bill in the best possible form and serve as many people as we can.
Thank you, Stephen. If it's okay with you, I'd like to acknowledge colleagues I do see here on today's meeting. I see Representative Fitzgibbons, Representative Macri. We're going to hear from Representative Sen in a bit. Senator Kaiser had to leave, Representative Eslick, Senator Hunt. I saw Representative Corey, and former Senator Frocht, my good friend, former Senator Frocht, who's here. I think that's everybody. Just wanted to acknowledge that they were here today on this briefing. If I missed anybody, please shout out. I apologize. But Stephen,
Representative Rude.
Sorry. Thank you, Representative Rude. Thank you. I think first it's important to go back to how we the work that we've done over the last 5 years addressing hate crimes. You know, when I was in the House back in 2019, I was really shocked to discover that hate crimes was actually not defined in law as a hate crime. It was defined as malicious harassment. And through a lot of great work and advocacy from a lot of folks here on today's briefing, we worked with the ADL, the Jewish Federation, as well as the Latino Civic Alliance to change our laws in 2019 and call it for what it was. It was not going to be called malicious harassment. It was going to be called a hate crime. But also, I think more importantly, we're going to ensure that members of our LGBTQ plus community were also going to be a part of the hate crime law, because actually they were omitted in the old malicious harassment law. And we got that work done. And part of that work then also led to a task force a lot of work was done. It was housed in the Attorney General's office by a lot of advocates to come up with further recommendations on how we could address the large rise in hate crimes, of course, here in our state. And I think at the time, we were in the top 5 in the country in the amount of hate crimes that was reported on in our country. We put forward some of those recommendations. Those recommendations came out in 2020. We put forward just a few of those recommendations in 2021. But unfortunately, with the pandemic and the online sessions that we had, the virtual sessions, we just could not get some of those things across the finish line. So we've been focused in terms of then working this last actually year and a half to bring about this hate crime hotline, again, model after the state of Oregon. Last year, as Stephen, as you pointed out, we were able to get it out of committee, out of the Law and Justice Committee in the Senate, but we had some hiccups along the way. And I think our budget team was a little cautious on that fiscal note. And so we've been working all summer and all fall with a lot of advocates here and with the Attorney General's office, as Stephen pointed out, to bring down that fiscal note. I think to hopefully get folks a little bit more comfortable of what we're trying to do. We've seen over the last months and over the last couple of years the rise in hate crimes and bias incidents, as pointed out earlier. The amount and large rise of incidents towards religious institutions has been off the chart. But I think also one of the things that we're trying to accomplish is try to get at some of those recommendations that came out of that hate crime blue ribbon report back in 2020, which was, can we get more accurate data? Because we have numerous local law enforcement that are some are doing well trying to track this, like King County and the city of Seattle, but there's a lot of jurisdictions out there that are not tracking it or doing the best they can. We also want, of course, have folks feel safe and have a comfortable place to go if they feel they are a victim of a hate crime. We know that there's still a large amount of having trust issues with law enforcement, with a lot of folks in our communities, and having, I guess, a more neutral place to go where they can talk about it, but also that where again that folks can be provided resources on where to go and get help. So we've been working all summer and all fall, getting this piece of legislation ready to go here for 2024. It's Senate Bill 5427. It is currently, we're hopeful that we can get us across the finish line with all of your support. For those of you who will be here, we will be looking at you to get it out of our Senate chamber and then onto the House and hopefully then onto the governor's desk for signature.
Thank you so much, Senator. And our last speaker, but certainly not least, I just wanted to invite Representative Sen to help us here and carrying this forward in the House and on all of these amazing priorities. So thank you so much, Representative.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Stephen, for having me, and thanks everybody for being here. And you know, Cassie, your comments really struck me so personally, just thinking could easily have replaced your story with the Jewish community, and I'm sure with many others. But the reality for a lot of us is that historic trauma and that historic impacts of hatred and of fear and of slurs and of you don't belong here and redlining or whatever you have really is coming to the fore right now for so many people. And unfortunately, things that happen in our world, whether it was COVID or now the Middle East conflict, really just exacerbates those issues, and we just see an escalation in so much hate crime, which is just so sad because we have such a wonderful state and community, and yet this is really such a reality for too many of us across Washington. I also want to put a finer point on the issue of hate crimes, and when we talk about anti-Semitism or anti-Asian hate, is that it does move rapidly from speech to violence, right? Like what happened at the Wing Museum, when we see the graffiti or bomb threats from Jewish institutions and elsewhere, you know, in 2006 here in Washington State, when there was an Israel Middle East conflict, that led directly to the hate crime shooting and killing of Pam Wechter and 5 other women at the Jewish Federation. And at that time, there was no security on the building particularly. And you know, every time I go to the Jewish Community Center here on Mercer Island, I feel like there's yet another piece of increased security. And, you know, people shouldn't have to be concerned about bringing their children to preschool or going to work out at the gym just because it has a Jewish name on that organizational building. So this is, again, both a personal reality, a community issue, a commentary about hate crimes, but also these are real dangers. These aren't just conceptual threats. They are things that really impact people's lives and can lead to personal damage, business leaders, but also death. So we're serious on this. As the president of the National Association of Jewish Legislators as well, I hear from states around the country that have so many, and unfortunately more and more, having the nonprofit security grant program. And Rep. Hansen, I appreciate you bringing this forward. I think that almost, self-fulfilling. I didn't think about bringing it in Washington because I was like, oh, sure, yeah, we always deal with anti-Semitism and with these issues. And it almost took somebody else to step forward and saying, this is not normal to have security needs going into your religious institution. That is just what I have expected. We always have security guards. And oh, right, that's not your normal. That should not be the normal, and yet that is what it is. So I appreciate that it took somebody from the outside to bring this forward. And we got, again, an amazing investment last year of $500,000 in the budget, and that was before the Middle East conflict. And we have just seen anti-Semitism, Islamophobia skyrocket, and again, and the graffiti, the bomb threats, the fentanyl and other white powders being sent to Jewish institutions has really been terrifying. And again, the number of families keeping their kids home from school on for different reasons, because of what's going on and because of threats is really heartbreaking. So I hope that we can increase those grants. And I would also mention, as I think Mary and Stephen both mentioned, there's a lot of small nonprofit organizations who, need that safety and don't necessarily know how to apply. And for a lot of our grants, we have technical assistance. And I think it would make sense for us also just to include a little bit of funding to help some of those smaller organizations or community groups that maybe English isn't their first language, but they need that protection, to make sure that there's that technical assistance so that they don't get left out from this grant program. So I look forward to increasing that, to including some technical assistance again, so it's available to all of our diverse communities across the state. And just thank ADL and the Jewish Federation and Senator Valdez and Senator, I think that's the same first time I've said it out loud, Senator Hansen, for your leadership, and look forward to helping get this across the finish line. And I know it'll be a priority of the Jewish Caucus. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much, Representative Sen, and for helping to really contextualize it. And as you were talking, it feels like every day there's some new piece of story. And I totally didn't mention, we had just this weekend 7 really visceral bomb threats against Jewish institutions and synagogues just in the Puget Sound alone. And it's actually a part of a nationwide targeting of Jewish institutions that had over 200 bomb threats, and just like horrible. I won't share what the message was. And of course, their goal is to give us the impression that Jewish institutions aren't safe, but they're wrong, and we're going to do everything in our power to make sure that they are safe. And one of the things we can do is to help make sure that that burden isn't something that a community has to do alone, right? Which is the purpose of both the grants and the hotline. Give them a place to call and give support. It means the world to folks to know that government has their back, that their community has their back, that we're going to take a stand that says, you're wrong. They are welcome here. They are safe here. And we're going to do that. So I will stop talking and also open the floor for questions. We're going to stop recording so that if you ask questions that you're not roped into our recording here.